Welcome to the IRIS Community Partners training module that focuses on initial client outreach. Barb and Cindy, two members of ICP's admin team, will present strategies and tips that will be helpful after you accept a task and first reach out to the client you will be assisting. We're going to cover a few topics within this module, including initial contact strategies, the pros and cons for meeting either in person with the client or for completing the task over the phone or virtually. And finally, we will review the importance of boundaries while working with a client and why completing a case note form is essential.
Okay, so the first step to working with a client is actually contacting the client. In the majority of cases, the most efficient way to contact the client is by text. And we recommend that you text in English and their native language. Google Translate has been very helpful for this and is what is most widely used by our volunteers. So you might be wondering, how do I do this? And what do I say in this first communication? Let's take a look at the information that you'll have available to you once you have accepted a task. So let's say a volunteer accepted a task to help a client apply for energy assistance. For this example, we'll call the volunteer Joe Volunteer. So Joe Volunteer will receive an email like this one from either the team leader or one of the program administrators, Barb or myself. You can see in the body of the email, the task that Joe accepted is to assist a client with energy assistance application. The client name, contact information, and language spoken is right here in the table. Joe can look through the rest of the information given, and that will inform his first communication with the client. So when Joe is ready to contact the client, he can then create the initial text message to the client using Google Translate app on his phone. This works for the majority of the languages that we encounter. Joe can click and open the Google Translate app on his phone. You can see at the lower part of the screen, it is set to translate from English to Arabic. You can choose different languages by clicking on those squares. Then Joe can type his message in English into the Google Translate app. His first message for this task should be something like, "Hi, Ollie. My name is Joe. I am a volunteer with IRIS. I can help you with your energy assistance application. Do you still need help with this?" And just a note, very important to always mention IRIS and the type of task you are helping with, as some of our clients may be working with other volunteers on other tasks, and it could be confusing to them. So then Joe can copy the text that is translated to Arabic using the little copy icon. Joe can then return to his messaging app and paste the Arabic message. Joe should also include the message in English when texting. And then Joe can send the message to the client. When the client texts Joe back, he can copy the text from his messaging app right into Google Translate to translate the message. And he can continue with the communication like this from here. So you can also use WhatsApp instead of the messaging app. Many IRIS clients prefer WhatsApp because it's free, even internationally. It works on all devices, Android and Apple, and in many cases does not require a data plan. It's also end-to-end encrypted, which makes it safer than using the messaging app. If you're unfamiliar with WhatsApp, that's okay. We have a tutorial linked by QR code at the end of this video, and that will show you how to download and use WhatsApp. Another alternative for communication is to try calling the client. In this case, we suggest you use simple English and always mention IRIS and the task that you can help with. So these first communications will be really important to help you determine what type of interpretation, if any, you'll need to complete the task, and if you can complete it remotely or if you need to be in person. For this particular type of task, helping with an energy assistance application, it may be possible to do this remotely and just use Google Translate, ChatGPT, or Tarjimly. So you'll have to see how the communication goes with the client and determine also which materials and documents might be needed and if the client can locate those documents. Finally, there is a possibility that the client will not respond to your text. Now, there are a few reasons you may not get a response. It could simply be that the client's number has changed or the staff member transferred the wrong number to our volunteer system. The client may not be literate or tech savvy. That would affect their ability to understand your text. Also, clients and immigrants in general right now are weary of answering unknown texts and phone calls because of the current political climate. So I should mention that IRIS staff are working on better ways to prepare clients for volunteer outreach so that we minimize the number of non-responses. So what should you do if you do not get a response to your texts after several attempts? You can email your team leader and fill out a case note to document that the client did not answer. Your team leader can then check in with IRIS staff to see if the phone number was entered incorrectly or if there are other ways to contact the client. The team leader will then give you further instructions. So now I'm going to turn over to Barb, and she will talk to you about meeting locations.
Okay, after you have gotten a response from the client, you will need to set up a meeting for assisting them with the task you have accepted. There are a few considerations to keep in mind while you and the client make these arrangements. First, please consider there are several benefits to setting up an in-person meeting when that's possible. In-person communication does tend to be easier when trying to minimize a language barrier. Body language and facial expressions will help you communicate quite a bit and could diffuse frustration for both of you. Also, clients are quite accustomed to meeting in their homes, and they often appreciate the opportunity to offer their hospitality. You should be prepared to be offered a beverage or a snack while you are there. In addition, documents that you might need to use to accomplish the task are more easily accessed when you are at the client's home. These documents can include things like their work authorization card or EAD card that contains their A number, also known as the alien number or the USCIS number. They might have been mailed letters from the Department of Social Services, or they might have bills that you need to review. Their refugee travel document, if they do have refugee status, can come in handy because that has birth dates as well as their A numbers. So any combination of these may be necessary in order to assist with the task at hand. Now, the next point is something IRIS emphasizes in most contexts. Focusing on acting as a guide through a task is much easier in person and could better position the client to complete the task independently in the future, and therefore ensure that you are actually doing something with the client instead of doing it for them. However, we understand that it might not be possible to meet at a client's home. So other options for in-person meetings can include local libraries or coffee shops. And often the client will have some suggestions about where that can happen. Or if you need to, you can talk to your team leader about suggestions for where other locations might exist, and especially places that have good Wi-Fi. Now, of course, it is possible to accomplish tasks using the telephone as well. We have many volunteers who have been quite successful with accomplishing tasks while having the client on the phone. Even with basic English skills, clients can participate in three-way calls. And often a three-way call would be necessary if you have to contact an agency like Access Health Connecticut, if you're assisting with Husky Health Insurance, or if you're assisting with a call to a utility company, something like that. That's when a three-way call can come in handy and a task can be accomplished that way. Also keep in mind that the Tarjimly app does have a three-way calling option, and we're going to review that app in a moment, but that will give you a live interpreter on the phone so that you can talk to a client with an interpreter over the phone and try to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. The last option, of course, is a virtual meeting, and that is possible. That would be something you would have to determine when you first chat with the client, because it would rely on a basic level of computer proficiency and email use, and you want to ensure that a client has those skills and actually has a computer that they can have a meeting on. Sometimes using a phone with a meeting is a little bit more challenging, especially if you have to review documents or something like that. But again, that is something that you and the client would determine in your first outreach. So now Cindy's going to come back and talk through some tips for working with interpreters.
Okay, so for many of the tasks that our volunteers help clients with, the translation apps are sufficient to get the job done. But in the event that this is not the case and you find yourself working with an in-person volunteer interpreter, there are a few things to consider that'll make the interaction smoother. So first, you'd want to set up the expectation for the in-person meeting. You can do this by sending an email or having a brief phone call conversation with the interpreter. This email or conversation should include a reminder about confidentiality. So the information exchanged in that meeting should not be shared with anyone. You'll want to provide meeting dates and times and your contact information just in case something comes up and the interpreter needs to cancel. You'll want to provide meeting context. So let them know that the meeting is, let's say, to apply for energy assistance. Also, you'll want to communicate that you expect them to interpret what the client is saying to you and what you are saying to the client, and really not to add other information unless they talk to you about it first. At this point, it is, if it's possible, it can be helpful to provide documents or background information to them ahead of the meeting. So in the case of, let's say, Joe volunteers task, Joe might send a link to the energy assistance application. So the interpreter could become familiar with that document and be better prepared for that meeting. Just please always remember not to share the client's personal information with anyone, especially by email. That's very important to keep our clients' information confidential. So if you scan the QR code here on the screen, it would take you to the Switchboard website. So this is a resource hub. Switchboard is a resource hub for refugee service providers. They have a ton of information on that website. And this link will take you to a script that talks about the items that we just covered. So you can take a look at that and possibly implement some of their suggestions if you are using an in-person interpreter. We also have a QR code at the end of the presentation. That's a short video showing a conversation between a staff member, an interpreter, and a client. And this can be especially helpful for those of you who have not worked with interpreters in the past. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Barb, and she's going to discuss maintaining boundaries when working with clients on specific tasks.
Okay, so one of the most common challenges that volunteers encounter when working with a client is that they request additional assistance beyond the original task that you accepted. So that happens almost every time a client meets with a volunteer. And there are some responses that you should have ready so that you can assure them that they will receive the assistance that they need, but also that you are not necessarily the person that can help in that moment. So that first response is, I will let Iris know you need this additional help. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. If it is a task that is being requested that is time sensitive, then you should alert your team leader pretty much immediately. Usually that's via email. And something that is time sensitive would be like they've received an eviction notice and are in danger of losing their apartment imminently, or they've received a letter that they showed you, indicating that their SNAP benefits will be cut off if they don't upload some documentation within the next couple of weeks. Something along those lines you should let your team leader know about right away. But you should also submit a case note form, whether it is a time-sensitive request or whether it's something that can wait a little bit. We're going to review case note forms and why they're important in another moment, but this is something you need to get used to doing every single time you accept a task. When you do receive a task information, the client contact information, that chart that you receive that Cindy already reviewed, at the end of that email, there is always a link that you click on in order to access the case note form. You should fill that form out and submit it as soon as you can after completing a task. And one reason is because it is a way that you notify IRIS that there needs to be additional assistance offered to this client. Now, something else you should be doing consistently with clients is encouraging them to leave a message for IRIS themselves at this number that is on the screen. That is the client request number. And clients can either leave a voicemail or they can text the information. And staff review that the information coming in on that line daily. They triage it. They put it into a giant spreadsheet. And quite often it's something that is sent out as another volunteer task. So even though it might take a little more time, that is something clients should get used to doing. And if initially they need a little help with that, feel free to help them with it. But it will move them along that continuum of independence in order to be able to contact IRIS themselves. Now, one final point about boundaries, and that's has to do with ensuring as best you can that your messaging for clients about their particular concerns or worries are as consistent with IRIS staff as possible. And we know that you're not going to have any idea, more than likely, what IRIS staff has been talking about with clients or what the updates are on a particular situation. But it is very important for volunteers to understand that while staff is very busy, all clients have worked with multiple staff members before being connected to a volunteer. Now, due to the crisis that everyone is navigating right now in refugee resettlement, it is very natural for clients to be frustrated with how quickly staff are able to respond to their needs. However, when a client is articulating this frustration, the volunteer should keep in mind there is usually more context to the situation than what the client is sharing in that moment. Now, of course, responding with empathy is very important, but the volunteer's comments back to the client should remain neutral. Letting the client know they will inform IRIS about their concerns is the best way forward. They will appreciate an empathetic ear, but giving more specific feedback on a situation where the volunteer may not know all the facts could undermine the messaging coming from IRIS staff. Also keep in mind with regard to how you're communicating with clients about what kind of assistance is possible is that the ICP program is meant to deliver on core services. Those are the services that IRIS is contracted to complete with the State Department, with Church World Service, the national organization that IRIS is an affiliate of. And so many of the things that clients could use assistance with do fall outside that parameter. Now, IRIS cannot always manage the process involved with those kinds of requests. For example, sometimes it comes up that there are additional furnishings that the volunteer believes a client could use. We've heard about dining tables as one example. Other examples include access to bicycles. Now, sometimes these things are possible, but more than likely not. The way you find out on behalf of a client is to ask IRIS by contacting your team leader or submitting a case note to see if it's possible. But when the answer is no, it is not because IRIS does not want to help with this. It's because the capacity simply does not exist at this time. I know that's a very difficult message and it's hard to share those kinds of things with clients, but that is the world we're living in, and everyone is doing their very best to offer the kind of assistance that will make sure clients get on the road to independence as best as possible. And now Cindy's going to come back and review what I mentioned just a moment ago, and that is that case note form.
Thanks, Barb. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about case notes. In general, as Barb mentioned, the volunteer will complete case notes when you've completed the task that was assigned. However, there may be instances when you complete a case note to record that the client didn't respond or that the task is ongoing, pending some paperwork or appointments, or that the task can't be completed, and you would state the reasons. So we're going to take a look at the process for submitting a case note for the task that Joe volunteer completed. So remember, this was for helping the client apply for energy assistance. And I will add for context that Joe used Tarjimli for his meeting with the client. So first, where will Joe find the link for the case note form? So Joe's going to go back to that email from the team lead. This email contains the link to the case notes, and that link is towards the bottom of the email. Next, he's going to click on that link and open the case note form. He's then going to enter the information that's asked for. So first, he's going to enter the task number. And remember, this can be found in the body of the email we were just looking at. FIN 513. Please always include the prefix before the number if there is one. This tells us the category that the task falls under. It's important to us. Joe's then going to enter the client's name. He'll then enter the date and estimated time of the task. He'll then enter his name, his email address, his phone number. He'll also enter any of the volunteers' names that were present, if there were any in addition to him. In this case, there was none, so he'll type in none. He'll also answer whether there was an interpreter present for the task. So this question is asking if there was someone physically in person. And in this case, the answer is no. He's also going to answer which method of interpretation he used. So you can see the options here. Was the interpreter in person? Was it someone live on the phone, conferencing, Zoom or FaceTime? Was it electronic, Google Translate, ChatGPT, or was interpretation not necessary? There's also a choice for other. So if you click on other, you'll be able to type in some text and explain what other type of interpreter you may have used. For this task, Joe is going to choose live interpreter on the phone because Joe used the Tarjimli app for his meeting. Joe's then going to briefly describe the task and how it went. So this is what Joe wrote. Abdullah and I met at his apartment. I had an interpreter from Tarjimli on the phone. We reviewed Abdullah's recent bill with Eversource and called the number listed from Abdullah's phone. Abdullah gave me permission to speak on his behalf. We learned he should be eligible for their hardship program, but needed to send them proof of SNAP approval. He is also eligible to enroll in the Energy Assistance Program through Community Action Program of New Haven, but will need to apply after September 1st. I helped him upload the required SNAP document, and we set a date when I would return to help him apply for the CAPNH program. So a nice little summary there. Then Joe will indicate whether follow-up is needed with the family and if he intends to follow up. So here Joe can refer to what he stated above. Okay. Last, Joe can then enter any information to communicate to staff about the task or family. Turns out that the family asked Joe for help with enrolling in ESOL classes while he was at their apartment. So that would be entered here. He writes, Abdullah indicated he would like help enrolling in ESOL classes. I told him I would let Iris know. Additionally, Joe could have stated, I gave Abdullah the Iris phone number and told him to call and ask for this help. At this point, the form is complete and can be submitted by clicking on the submit button. So please keep in mind that you can submit multiple case notes for a single task. Just remember to use the same task number each time. In this case, Joe should submit another case note after his second visit with the client to indicate that the task is complete. So now that you have seen how a case note is entered, Barb is going to talk about the importance of case notes.
In addition to allowing volunteers a mechanism for maintaining boundaries, the case note spreadsheet is Iris's record of what volunteers accomplish all in one place. So what that means is when you fill out a case note form, your responses populate a spreadsheet. When any other volunteer fills out a form, it populates the same spreadsheet. So anyone at Iris, whether it's staff or one of the ICP admins or a team leader with ICP, if we want to find out how a task is going, what was accomplished, if it's been completed or not, we can just go to that one form to find out what's going on. So it's very important that those forms are filled out so everyone can stay updated. In addition to that, Iris does need a record of the core services that have been implemented with clients. We need that for our grant compliance issues. There are still several grants that are in place that allow Iris to keep the programs that are still operating flowing in the most efficient way possible. As you've all heard, of course, most federal funding was removed, but there are smaller grants in place or state grants or even grants that have come from private organizations that need to have data to back up that Iris is complying with the requirements of the grants. And that is where we pull a lot of the data for the core services implemented by volunteers. Now, Iris also transfers that information to different locations. So that spreadsheet that the forms are populating, that information will be moved over to a national refugee database that is monitored both by the federal government as well as Church World Service, which is the National Refugee Resettlement Agency that Iris is affiliated with. And finally, when a team leader or one of the ICP admins or staff reviews the case note spreadsheet, that's where we will find out if clients need further assistance and how we send out new tasks so that that assistance is followed up on. So please be vigilant with those case notes. We really appreciate you taking the extra few minutes, sometimes more than a few minutes, to complete one. And if you have additional questions about information that you want to relay, you can always talk to your team leader about that. And now Cindy's going to come back and tell you about some additional resources for some of the topics we've been covering.
Okay, so this really concludes our training part of this module on initial client contact. So we do have a few additional resources to share with you, and we're going to provide QR codes for each of the resources listed here. Those will be in the next slide. So they'll, but just to let you know, there'll be links also underneath this video in YouTube to these extra resources, just in case you don't catch the QR codes. So we'll go through them. So the first slide here shows tutorials related to Tarjimli. The first QR code discusses the difference between the premium and the basic version of the Tarjimly app. So if you use your QR code to get to that video, you will learn all about what the differences are. The second tutorial discusses the features you can access in only the free app, so the basic features. And the third tutorial discusses the features that you can access if you decide to pay for the premium package of the app. Okay, so here we have provided a QR link to a tutorial that will show you how to download the WhatsApp application on your phone. And again, as we mentioned, this app is completely free to use. So I'll give you a second to see that QR code. Okay. And then last, here is the QR link to the example interaction with an interpreter. It's a video that we mentioned earlier in the slides. This will be especially helpful for those people who have not worked with interpreters before. So this video will show an interaction with a staff member and a volunteer and a client. Okay. I'll give you a minute to get this QR code. So we wanted to thank you for choosing to volunteer for IRIS Community Partners. We're so happy that you've joined us for this training. And we hope that you found this helpful and that you will feel better prepared to engage with and assist our very important IRIS clients.